The air hit me first, colder than the outside street. It was that specific damp cold that only lingers deep underground in empty subway stations, even in the middle of summer. I was running late. This was the last train heading Northline for the Express. I rushed past the turnstile, the echo of my footsteps bouncing off the sterile tile walls. No one else was on the platform. That was unusual for this time of night, even on a Tuesday. The clock above the tracks flashed 12:47 a.m., just as the automated voice announced the incoming train. I felt a sudden drop in temperature, like walking into a meat locker. When the train screeched to a halt, the doors hissed open onto a perfectly empty car. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, buzzing with a high, irritating frequency. I hesitated for a second. Should I walk down to another car? No time. I stepped inside and the doors immediately slammed shut behind me. I slid onto a seat near the window, pulling out my phone. It was completely dead. Great. I sighed and leaned my head back, trying to ignore the absolute silence of the train. Usually, even the last train has drunks, students, or late-night workers. But this Quarand, apparently the whole train was deserted. Then I noticed her. She was sitting directly across from me, maybe 2 seats down. An old woman, hunched over, wearing a threadbare gray coat and a bonnet pulled low. I hadn't seen her get on. She wasn't moving, just sitting there, facing straight ahead. I went back to staring out the window, trying to catch my reflection in the dark glass. When I glanced back at the old woman, she was now looking directly at me, and she was smiling. It wasn't a warm, gentle smile. It was wide, impossibly wide, stretching her thin lips taut across gums that looked almost black in the poor light. It didn't reach her eyes at all. Her eyes were wide open, perfectly circular, fixed on me without blinking. She didn't move her head. She didn't shift in her seat. She just sat there, frozen, with that terrifying grin. I felt a sudden rush of adrenaline, the kind that makes your stomach drop out. I quickly looked away, fumbling with my phone again, trying to will it back to life. I told myself she was just an eccentric old lady. Maybe she was asleep, dreaming something bizarre. But I could still feel those eyes, unblinking, burning into the side of my face. I risked another look. She hadn't moved an inch. The smile was still there, unwavering. That ass when I noticed the detail that made the hair stand up on my arms. Beneath the wide brim of her bonnet, a deep purple bruise circled her neck, almost hidden by the collar of her coat. I stood up, needing to move, needing to get out of that car. My stop was next University Avenue. I moved quickly toward the next set of doors, keeping my back to the woman. Just as I reached the handle, the train began to slow down, the lights flickering violently, threatening to plunge us into darkness. The announcement came over the speakers, "Now approaching. ... Tunnel 33. Wait, Tunnel 33. That tunnel wasn't on this line. It was miles out of the way, infamous for the derailment years ago where dozens of construction workers were killed. I slammed my hand against the emergency open button, but nothing happened. The train pulled out of the brief stop and accelerated rapidly, plunging us into the blackness of the tunnel. As we rocketed through the dark, the lights in the car went completely out, leaving only the sporadic flashes of emergency lamps. In the brief strobing light, I looked toward the windows, and I saw them. They weren't outside. Zeti were in the car. Where there had been only one old woman, there were now dozens of figures. They filled every seat, standing in the aisles, pressed against the doors. They looked like ordinary people, men in work boots, women in office clothes, teenagers with backpacks. but they were all staring, their faces pale and distorted in the flashing light. And every single one of them was smiling that same impossible, wide, unblinking smile. I stumbled back, tripping over a bag that hadn't been there before. The train was now moving impossibly fast, vibrating violently. As the emergency lights flashed again, I saw the old woman again. She was standing now, right next to the seat I had abandoned. Sure. Her gaze dropped from my eyes down to my feet, and she lifted a bony, gray hand and pointed. I looked down. Lying on the floor where I had been sitting was a single rusted bolt, the kind that holds track rails together. And I finally understood. The cold, the emptiness, the wrong tunnel. I wasn't riding the last train home, Set. I was riding the train of those who never made it home, the souls still traveling the tracks where they died. The lights came back on, bright and steady. The car was completely empty again. Just me, the silence, and the horrific, deafening rush of the train through the black tunnel. I was alone, but I knew I was no longer the only living person on this train. And the smile I saw reflected back in the dark window now. It wasn't mine. Stay safe out there, and never miss the last train. It might just find you instead. Follow and subscribe if you dare for more stories from the dark side of the city.